So, Ric Flair is going to be having one more match. Now, I have heard concern from some of you that maybe this isn't the best idea for the Nature Boy considering his age. But what if I told you that even with this upcoming bout that Ric Flair is nowhere close to being the oldest wrestler to ever wrestle? Well, that might get you wondering, who is exactly? Well, that's the topic of this episode, because today... Thank you to Edgar Perez and the rest of my awesome Patreon supporters. Thank all of you so much. That's right, believe it or not, at 73 years old, Ric Flair would not be the oldest wrestler to ever perform in a professional wrestling match. In fact, he wouldn't even crack the top 25. That's how much of a spring chicken he is for this list. And so just be assured that when it comes to wrestling, you're only as young as you feel. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Starting this list off is none other than Bullet Bob Armstrong, who is the head of the Armstrong family. At 79 years old and 220 days, he had his most recent match on May 11th, 2019. This was done for Continental Championship Wrestling in Dothan, Alabama. And he didn't hide behind a tag team, as this was a one-on-one bout. And even though he was almost 80 years old, he not only had this match one-on-one, but he also won it, as he triumphantly took on the Assassin, proving that age is nothing but a number. At 79 years old, the great Kujika took on and defeated Akira Hayado and Jackie Numazawa, where he partnered up as part of a team with Shijino Shima. This took place on December 18th, 2021, and it happened for Nagata Pro Wrestling, which not surprisingly took place in Nagata, Japan. Now, some of you might be wondering, wasn't Bullet Bob also 79 years old too? Well, yes, he was, but Kujika was 2 weeks older than him when he had his most recent match, thus giving him the edge. However, you know who's also 79 years old but wrestled at an older age than Kojika? Well... Next up, we have one half of the Valiant brothers, Jimmy in particular, who at the age of 79 years old and 281 days wrestled his most recent match in May of 2022. Wait a second, May 2022? That just happened! And in fact, this isn't even scheduled to be Jimmy Valiant's last match, as that's scheduled to take place this summer. I wonder why no one is talking about this one. Anyway, as of this recording, Gentleman Jim Valiant's most recent match was for the Patriotic Wrestling Federation in York, South Carolina, where he teamed up with Dion Johnson and Sweet Dreams to defeat the team of AJ Frost, Chris Anderson, and Tony Benj. Alright, so this entry was rather hard to place. Even though there was a documentary about him, a lot of the facts are hard to narrow down and verify, considering that he's a rather obscure wrestler, and of course, kayfabe and all. Dave Kidney was featured as the oldest active professional wrestler in the world, with the BBC even doing a documentary on him and his amazingly long career. However, even with that, it's hard to pinpoint a lot of accurate information about him, as some sources state that his last known match took place in Scotland in 2011, which would put him at roughly 80 years old. Not really sure since his actual date of birth hasn't been specified. However, as that documentary put it, he was still an active wrestler, and there are some other sources that say that he continued to wrestle on, with his last match taking place when he was 81. And again, there are other sources that say he was actually 82 when he had his last bout. But at any rate, no matter what, he still does qualify for the top 10, even if we're not sure exactly where to put him. On his 80th birthday, Ox Baker took on Bobo Brazil Jr. at the CCW show in Marion, Ohio. Baker was best known for his move, the Heart Punch, sometimes known as the Hurt Punch, as well as his famous catchphrase, "I love to hurt people." And on top of that, he was also featured as an actor in movies such as Escape from New York. Mexican wrestler Teniblius wrestled at 80 years old and 71 days, with his most recent match happening on August 18th in 2019. This was at the 2019 Expo Lucha Convention in San Diego, California, and it saw him teaming up with Dr. Wagner Jr. and Octagon to take on and defeat Fuerza Guerrera, Mysterio Jr., and Peralta Morgan. Dominic DENUCCI wrestled his last match for a PWS show in Toronto, Canada, teaming up with the franchise Shane Douglas to take on the team of Lord Zoltan and Sean Blanchard. This match took place in April of 2012 when DENUCCI was 80 years old, and pleasantly enough, DENUCCI and Douglas were victorious. Oh, and just to be specific, it's 80 years and 82 days, just giving him the edge by 11 days. Taking place when she was 81 years old, Moolah would team up with Mae Young to defeat the team of Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson, and they did so for a WWE SmackDown taping, which aired just 2 days after the match took place. Now, this was a tag team bout, and it only lasted 3 minutes and 39 seconds, but nevertheless, for 81 years and 61 days, it's still very impressive. In March of 2008, Kowalski would wrestle his last match where he defeated Gino Giovanni with his classic claw hold for Top Rope Promotions. This took place in Fall River, Massachusetts, and it occurred when Kowalski was 81 years old, making him the oldest male on this list. And while the fabulous Moolah was also 81 years old too, she was 81 years and 61 days, where Kowalski was 81 years and 153 days, thus giving him the advantage by several months. And before we get to that number one spot, we do have some quick honorable mentions, such as Bill Dundee, Mil Mascaras, and Vince McMahon, who all wrestled at 76 years old, as well as Gypsy Joe, who wrestled at 77, and Dory Funk Jr., who just barely missed out on making this list, wrestling his last match in 2020 at 79 years old and 26 days. Oh, and let's not forget about Bushwhacker Luke. While he might only be a young, spry 75 years old, he is still active, so you never know what tomorrow will bring. Oh, and while they might not be as old as Bushwhacker Luke, I do want to point out that there are other wrestlers who are still active in their 70s, such as Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. and Jerry Lawler, who even had a heart attack on air. But that just goes to show you can't keep a good wrestler down. And in the ultimate irony of them all, the oldest performing wrestler of all time is named Mae Young. Her last match happened when she was 87 years old, taking place on November 15th, 2010. And fittingly enough, this was an episode of Old School Raw, where Mae Young went into a 2-on-1 handicap match against Lay Cool, where the falls counted anywhere. And even though the odds were stacked against her, Mae Young made it out on top, scoring a pinfall victory over Layla. Now, I do want to point out that this match didn't take place in the ring, as it was falls count anywhere, and it happened entirely on the ramp, and it was less than a minute long, and it involved a lot of outside interference, with Mae Young just slapping Layla and putting her foot over her for the win. But this just goes to show you that professional wrestling doesn't have to be lots of cardio and outside dives and huge back bumps. It can be whatever you want it to be. And while it wouldn't happen, this wasn't even supposed to be Mae Young's last match, as she did make a request to wrestle Stephanie McMahon's daughter on her 100th birthday. Now that would have been a sight to see. Well, there you go, the 10 oldest wrestlers to ever wrestle. Which one of these was your favorite? Let me know down in the comments, and please make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.